So, ladies and gentlemen, today on Screenshots, this will be the first in a two-part series by popular request dedicated to all my family and friends of the North Shore of New Brunswick who are big fans of this show. Now, the Waltons in 2020 is getting a new surge of popularity in Canada because of its regular airings weekly on Vision TV, seen in syndication throughout the world still, but it harkens back to an era of the 1970s and early 80s where high levels of quality drama and cinematography were the norm and not the exception like there is now. Even though there are multifaceted dramatic shows, series like The Waltons really stood out because it combined all the best aspects of acting, scripting, cinematography, plot, and something making something so simple as the Waltons made it extremely complex. Now, the Waltons tells a story about a family in rural Virginia during the Great Depression and the pre World War II and post World War II era. It was created by the great Earl Habner Jr. based on his book Spencer's Mountain and the 1963 film of the same name. Earl Hamner had been a respected writer in television for a number of years, did a lot of half hour and hour long episodes of The Twilight Zone. He was considered probably one of Rod Serling's, what he called writers in training during the last few years of the show. And he's probably most well known for the Twilight Zone episode, Test Bell, which talks about a rural area where a woman becomes a witch to lure her boyfriend away from his new paramour. Anyway, now the television movie version of the book called "The Homecoming: A Christmas Story" was broadcast on December 19th, 1971, with a good amount of the same actors that appeared in the series. Now, CBS really appreciated the high ratings and reception to the show, and it ordered one season of episodes based on the same characters, which became the television series. Now, beginning in September '72, the series aired on CBS for 9 seasons. It was canceled by CBS in '81. There was a trio of television movie sequels in the mid '80s, with three more in the 1990s, again on CBS. Now, the big thing here, Lorimar Productions, who later did Dallas, made a lot of money off the series, and it was distributed by Warner Brothers Domestic Television Distribution and Syndication, which means in Canada we got the episodes either a few hours before or a week before the U.S. airing. It was a big Sunday night show on CBC and CHSC in New Brunswick. CBC, CHSC, best based out of St. John. Now, the main story is set, of course, in something called Waltons Mountain. It's a fictional community in Jefferson County, Virginia. And the plots that Hamner put together were based on his experiences growing up. And he grew up in a small and beautiful community called Schuyler in Nelson County, Virginia. Now, the time period of the TV series is 13 years between the Great Depression and World War II. And the Seder series was Christian and democratic in scope, pretty well explains it because at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt and Harry Truman were running the country, and that kind of reflects the modern democratic era of politicization that was going on from the New Deal 1930s to the Truman resurrection of the U.S. economy after the 41 to 45 war they were involved with. Now, the the main character in the book is played by, in the movie is played by the great Richard Thomas, known as John Boy Walton. Now he has six brothers and sisters. His parents, John Sr. and Olivia Walton, and the elder grandparents, Zeb Walton and Esther Walton. Now, the main actors in it, of course, Richard Thomas plays the award-winning John Boy. Now, Ralph Waite, great underrated actor, plays the father. The multi-Emmy award-winning Michael Learned played the mother, Olivia. Ellen Corby, a long-standing actress, plays grandmother Walton, kind of a, not say a bitter, but kind of a typical hardscrabble, fundamentalist Christian grandmother, and Zeb, played by the great Will Geer, is more of a gregarious grandfather that almost every family has had through the years. And these characters really stood out because it really appealed to that family aspect, be it Protestant, Catholic, whatever, because the family was always going through different changes of life. They were looking out for each other. They were celebrating the successes and helping with the bad moments because it was a like any family. There's up and down moments. Now, the brothers and sisters played by Julie Norton, Josh Wamsley, Mary Elizabeth McDonough, Eric Scott, David W. Harper, and Cami Coulter really stood out in many ways because they were young actors, but they were almost in the method. They would take their own personal young lives and kind of apply it to the characters. Now, in the show, John Boy is the eldest at 17. He wants to be a writer. He wants to be a journalist. He wants to chronicle the beauty and love he has for Waltons Mountain. Um, Hamner does a narration for the opening and the closing, which kind of determines what the plot is. And his father is a lumber mill operator, which appealed a lot to the lumberjacks in New Brunswick, thus its success. And Olivia was a stay-at-home mom who would also have aspirations from expanding from her big family to seek out her own passions, including flight and the arts and music and being a self-made woman. Now, the children are basically, like I said, each one has a different personality. Well, what's kind of bizarre, it they walk around barefoot, but that's kind of a misnomer because you would expect people in that section of the states where it's good temperatures most of the time wouldn't need heavy work boots. Of course, they had heavy work boots when they were working. Now, because they're a matriarchal and patriarchal family, a lot of the episodes are based on their positive relationships with relatives and strangers where the come across, including the infamous Baldwin sisters, who are two elderly spinsters who create moonshine in their in their in their own house based on their father's recipe, and which the Will Gear character and the rest of the characters in the show. There's a battle. The girls and the women don't want any of the recipe going to the hands of the elder people and even the young teen men of the region. While Ralph Wade's character, I mean, in real life, he said, we're the only, I think, Christian show that has a moonshine still as a major plot point. So there's, like I said, there's 7 or 8 different basic plots in every episode, and because episodes back then weren't cut to 44 minutes, or in some cases 48, 49, 51 minutes, there was a lot going on. Most of the episodes are syndication are not cropped because there is a lot going on. Now, other characters include Ike Gossi, who runs the local store, and later on, her snobbish wife, one of the Waltons calls him Corbett. There's an African American couple. There's very few what do you call it, supplementary regular characters, but the people he meet up across, everybody they touch them, he touched the people in a positive and a structural way. Now there was big changes with the show midway through the first few seasons when John Boy starts attending Boatwright University and he goes to the next phase of his career. But during the later half of the 77 season, the actress who played Esther Walton suffered a stroke and comes home before the death of Zeb Walton, because in real life Will Gear had passed away and Ellen Cormie had taken a stroke, and but this was incorporated into the show, and it just shows the transition. Had such a strong plot throughout the years that if something would happen in real life, that would apply to some of the actors. But as the season goes on, we find out that Olivia Walton character suffers from a recurrent disease, like a respiratory disease. There's more stress in the family. Girlfriends and boyfriends come and go, and husbands and wives come and go, and children as well. But overall, I would suspect the first season was just feeling out because they had a two-part episode about selling a cow that was going to put John enough money to go to college for his books. But that's kind of the old cliche. There were some very interesting episodes, especially where one of the elderly members of the Walton family was trying to battle against a land seizure similar to the Jackie Couture situation in New Brunswick at Kuchapaquack. And it really had an appeal with the Acadian community in New Brunswick because this was showing how the traditional way of life was being taken over by big government. The character in question recruited the Waltons, especially Zebediah, to basically take up guns against government that wanted to take their land and just literally pave a highway through it. So there was a lot going on that we could recognize was not only part of the Earl Hamner world, they were part of the regular world. Now, when it first aired, a lot of critics really embraced the show, and it won a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Drama Series in '73, and it also swept actor and actress for Richard Thomas and Michael Leonard. Actually, Leonard won in '73, '74, and '76. He later went on to win one for Nurse, also a big short time on St. Elsewhere. Now, Ellen Corby played Grandma Walton, was also a three-time winner in the supporting actress character category, winning in '73, '75, and '76. And Will Geer won Best Supporting Actor in '75. Now, the actress I was talking about, the great grandmother patriarch, Beulah Bondi, won an Emmy in '77 for lead actress in a single performance, where she replays Martha Corinne's Walton. Um, Now, in the show, she's the widow of Seb's brother, and the episode "The Conflict," like I was talking about, probably ranks as one of the most interesting look at the expropriation era, where a lot of parts of Canada states had went through from the 30s into the 1970s, where basically people were living on land, and because the government felt that progress should not be stopped by people want to live in the old ways. Now, it also won a Peabody Award for its first season, and the TV Guide, which is a good ranking of TV shows of all time, have it at number 34 on the uh, best 60 best series of all time. I would make the top 30 at least for what it is for a family drama with Christian elements, with spiritual elements. Um, I would figure, it's one of the most influential TV shows of all time. Because if you really got it, you can watch an episode of The Waltons, anchor back, and think about the old days. And just a little sidebar, by the way. Uh, in the late 1970s, I don't know if you guys remember that John Ritter played Reverend Fordwick on the show for a number of years. He was a very young actor at the time. He was probably the highest prominent young minister portrayed on television. Now, in my local parish in Nash Creek, which had services in Gravel Hill, the Nash Creek parish priest decided to give a sermon one night about the dangers of John Ritter's new series, Trees Company. As you all know, Trees Company was a kind of a farce comedy where a guy pretending to be gay was trying to live with two girls to pay rent because he was a poor up and coming cook, and it was kind of a comedy, a rival comedy, nothing, too overly softcore pornography or sexual. But the priest stood up on our pulpit for 15 minutes, chastising the Trees Company, chastising the actors, saying if you're going to watch a show, you might as well, go straight to hell because you're watching it. And my father was a big fan of the Waltons, and at the time, John Ritter was still on the Waltons as Reverend Fordwick in guest appearances. I think because it was filmed in the early part of '77 or before he was on Trees Company. And he went up to the priest after the service. He said, "Father, interesting sermon, but you know that the lead actor in Trees Company plays the minister on the Waltons." And the priest looked at my father like he had no right even to talk to him because priests were like that if you were challenged. And he said keep this is what he said, no pun intended, keep your goddamn opinions to yourself. And my father said, "Father, why are you cursing me over Jack Tripper?" He said, "Why did you watch the Waltons?" He said, "Why would I watch the Waltons?" Well, he said, "That's what everybody else does." Well, he said, "You know enough that what's in Three's Company." He said, you had no idea that John Ritter has been on the Waltons since 1972." And the priest said, "I'm not talking to you." He said, you don't even know what you're talking about. You didn't even listen to my sermon. It wasn't about the Waltons." Well, my father said, "If it wasn't about the Waltons, you've never seen it. Have you ever watched a show?" And the priest just walked away in this ludicrous kind of "I'm better than you" type of expression. And Dad turned to me and said, I'll never forget this. He said, if you don't watch the Waltons, you're not in on the impact of the show. So I want to also dedicate this podcast to my late father, who was a big fan of the Waltons, to that crackpot priest who we later found out was part of the sexual assault allegations in the North Shore, the Father Picots and Arsenaults and all that. I don't know if he was ever convicted, but he put it this way: that's an example of the egotism of this person. I had incidents with him before where basically he was questioning my faith in God because I liked the Montreal Canadiens. That's another podcast altogether. Because back in the day, you couldn't challenge a priest. But we're getting a little bit off topic. Just to wrap up, the Waltons, some people say it's a Christian show. There's Christian elements, but it's not like a holy roller Bible, because there's people in the show that would question Christianity. There was talk about science. There was talk about, evolution, the battle between the traditional, ways in the States. But I think the reason why it was strong in Canada, and you're going to love this, it basically said, love your neighbor, even though he may not love you. Everybody in the Waltons was finding a way to expand in their own life by being the best example for the Lord or for their family, because Lord and family was strong in here. But a lot of people I know, especially my age group over 50, certain episodes of the Waltons stand out more than others. And Jonathan Frakes of Star Trek Next Generation got a big start in the movie. I think it was in three or four episodes. We remember Jonathan Frakes. There's various up-and-coming actors, and Sissy Spacek was on the show. Aaron Moran from Happy Days. There was a lot of guest actors and actresses that went on to greater success or had great success at the time. But any show that has Ralph Waite, a very good character actor, Michael Lerner, one of the best female actresses of the 1970s and 80s, still a tremendous, inspiration for older actresses throughout the world. Richard Thomas, Will Geer, Ellen Corby, the naturality of all the younger brothers and sisters all together. There was always something going on, and movies are getting. We're going to have like Sopranos type ending where somebody's going to get shot or someone is it was never violent. It made you think, especially John Boy Walton, being a young journalist in the 80s. I took a lot of inspiration of what the trials and tribulations that John Boy went through. He started very naive in the episode, but he had to gain experience very quick. His heart was always in the right place. So the second podcast coming up will directly talk about Richard Thomas, because I know Richard Thomas has been a hero to a lot of people. We'll talk about his major roles through the years. But if anybody has a chance, there's various documentaries and books about the Walton series. You can probably pick it up on DVD for a low price. I think some of the sets are like $10-15. And, the prints are tremendous because same cinematography you saw on the Rockford Files, MASH, Night Gallery, a lot of CBS and NBC programming was shown here. But the episodes are very tight. There's no waste in movement. So from a cinematography and scripting standpoint, there's a lot going on in short bursts. And I don't know if the movies are available on DVD, but it's interesting, like the next chapter, right? And considering for a quarter century, they were America's favorite family, bar none, in the world's favorite family. But it's kind of weird. The Waltons never worked in a French or Spanish translation. It seems more silly than impactful. But again, I remember when it first came out, and I know CBC was questioning if they should have picked it up. But as soon as the second and third season came about, my God, Sunday nights. If I'm not mistaken, it was either 6 or 7 o'clock on Sunday nights. And Sunday nights were big in Canada because you had All in the Family, Mary Tyler Moore, Walt Disney, Carol Burnett. And it was just a magic 5 hours of programming. because usually Sunday was the day of church across Canada. So hope this finds you well. COVID Friday made a check CRB checks find you this week, and check out my Night Gallery podcast on Sins of the Fathers. It also talks about Richard Thomas. That ties in a little bit. This is on my search on my YouTube channel if you're a subscriber. Anyway, give a like, subscribe, or a comment. And if you like this podcast, tell your friends. If you don't like my podcast, keep it yourself because I don't want to bother with you because I don't want to hang with negative people that make crazy comments saying, oh, he slurs his words a little bit or whatever. I mean, come on, get over yourself. I have. I don't want people around that bring me down. They like the song. So if you like it, stay. If you don't like it, take off. Have a good day. Bye.